All right, what's up, everybody? My name is John Crain, and I'm the CEO of SuperRare.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Reimagine 2020, the Halloween edition of Tales from the Crypto. This is our fourth event within the Reimagine series of conferences. I'll be your host today, Adam, from the MouseBelt team. If you missed any of our past three events, feel free to visit the Reimagine 2020 website at ri2020.io for full access to over 150 interviews from some of your favorite projects and individuals in the space. Our main goal is pretty simple: is to talk shop with some of these top projects and leaders in the industry to shed light to help us understand blockchain's real impact and innovation, advancements towards a Web 3.0, and decentralized infrastructure, for our future. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce you to John. How you doing, John?
Doing great, Adam. Great to be here.
Thanks for taking time out of your day. Glad you can make it. As you can see, this is our Halloween edition. I'm rocking my SF gear.
Love it.
I just found out, we went to the same college here in the city. So super stoked to kick things off with, some synergy there and some, similar paths, I should say.
Let's go Warriors.
So cool, man. Yeah, no, thanks for joining. As I was mentioning before the call, we started the pandemic hit and we're going to sponsor a bunch of university events and meetups and hackathons, and obviously everything kind of got pushed back, delayed, canceled. And we said, let's throw our own conference. Like, why not? We bring in our partners and colleagues and shed some light. It's kind of expensive, right, to go to these conferences. And so here we are, 4 events later. We have you on to talk about NFTs and SuperRare. So excited to have you on. Let's kind of kick it off. This is the first time me meeting you. Give me a little background and kind of your journey into blockchain.
Sure. Yeah. So I think the journey actually started, very first at SF State. I was taking an econ class during the crash in 2008. I had zero interest in finance or anything at the time, but I was fascinated that everybody's money was disappearing. I thought that was what a horrible system. Where's all the money going? I don't understand. So that kind of led me down just interest into finance and things. I got super into Austrian economics, and that's kind of what ended up, at Bitcoin and then eventually Ethereum, which is where I spend most of my time now. But yeah, it was sort of a long meandering journey. But then at the same time, I was also pretty interested in generative art. And so the two, the two interests in crypto and art kind of collided. And so that was part of the inspiration for SuperRare.
Nice. So I think, so when did you come across Bitcoin then? Or super early days, 2008, 9, 10?
Oh, no. Yeah, no. Probably, I don't know, early, 2014 maybe or something. I was into Austrian economics, reading about gold and whatnot, and then kind of just was reading about this weird internet money that had a cap supply. It was deflationary, and I was like, well, I like that it's deflationary. That's a cool concept. And yeah, it was, I kind of dipped my toes in crypto at first. I was first job out of college, just kind of was doing some extra software development on the side, designing Bitcoin wallets and different things. But then got really excited about Ethereum when I read about what they were working on. To be honest, I was super skeptical. I thought it was too ambitious. I was I don't know if you're going to build a general purpose compute engine in a blockchain. That sounds like a horrible idea. But then obviously they launched the network. I started playing around with it and was super impressed and decided that I was going to dive in and work on that full time.
Word. So we might have even had a class together. We went to school at the same time. We might have not remembered actually from a long night, but tell me first what SuperRare is, and then I want to go into the history, a little bit of a history of NFTs and where they lie, and sure. we'll just go down this path. But before we kind of completely get into SuperRare, which we'll get into down the road, just give the audience kind of like what it is, what you're doing, what you're working on, and then we'll go down this NFT journey.
Sure. So Super is a platform for digital art NFTs. Kind of the core of it is a marketplace, so artists can sell digital art, and also collectors can buy and sell digital art as well. And it's sort of like the elevator pitch is that you can maybe like Instagram meets Christie's. So, we have a heavy focus on design and branding, and, really think about like, so the crypto component's kind of the facilitator. This market was going to exist anyway, and we're kind of just leveraging Ethereum as like part of our stack for, what we view as like a big, growing digital art market.
Yeah, awesome. And it's interesting. So you can buy, sell, and trade, right?
Yep, that exactly.
And so cool. I just wanted to set the tone here to, for those tuning in to check out this conversation, and like, let's go back in time a little bit. I'm not too familiar actually with, I understand NFTs now, I'm in the space, but even before this, right? And maybe you could shed a little bit of light of like, just digital art, in-game assets, this whole world of I don't know where it began, right? And a lot of these things started, I don't know, like years ago. I think even Brock Pierce was doing some trading, right? And there's all these like various games of buying and selling of digital assets, and what do they call them, like skins and stuff. And
yeah,
I'll kind of let you guide the convo, but I want to lead this path of where this journey started, right? Like, and it's years ago, previously to, prior to Ethereum, prior to NFTs. Can you talk to about like what, this digital art came from? Or
yeah, sure.
Or maybe even what the problem is.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there's like a couple components. Like one sort of like thing to address is just like in games generally, there's like assets that have, utility of the game, but at the same time, there's monetary value, and that, it might take you 100 hours to, mine enough gold or whatever the sort of like game mechanic is to get that asset. And for various reasons, game companies have often tried to like limit secondary market trading of these things, or, they kind of want to control how the economies work. And so, since like very early on, people have been trading, World of Warcraft characters. You might sell a World of Warcraft character on eBay, you level it up to a certain place, you meet, so you kind of like, outside of that, we'll send, wire somebody money and then meet up in the game, and we'll like, exchange the characters or something like that. So that's been, kind of what's going on. And really the first time, and I think there's, like a famous, there's lore, I don't know if this is actually true or not, but it's like Vitalik like had his like World of Warcraft account like suspended, or they like took one of his game items and he was super upset. I don't know if this is, a true story or not, but anyway, this is kind of like crypto lore.
A spooky story.
Exactly. And, you can kind of imagine. So yeah, like that, there's kind of this just like, it's super centralized. There's people kind of controlling these assets that are like, do have economic real world value. And so early on, like, I think the first time I saw it like related to blockchain was with a platform called Counterparty, which was built on top of Bitcoin for people who don't know. And basically you could send like little tiny amounts of Bitcoin, but it actually represented like ownership of an in-game item, maybe like a sword or like, a magic potion or something, for example. And that was my first exposure, was this a game called Spells of Genesis. And it was basically all the kind of like the cards in the game and a lot of the assets were issued on top of Counterparty. So there were these things that you could kind of like own yourself in your wallet, and you could also trade them just like you would any other Counterparty asset. And then from there, I think, another early art project that popped up was Rare Pepes. So there's like, there's a whole bunch of podcasts people can listen to if they want the full Rare Pepe history. But basically these people, it was sort of this like meme that turned into this like super crazy art collecting game. There was like Pepe Cash was another Counterparty asset people were using to trade the Pepes. And
I went to I went to a Pepe sponsored party here in the
amazing.
city. One of the locals, he's a crypto head too. Like, it was I forget what the title was, but it was sponsored by Pepe. It was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, exactly. So super OG and kind of this like crypto art space. They definitely, did a lot of like just kind of like pioneering and like educating people on why you might even want something like that. And then I think one of the earliest, at least one of the earliest project that I'm aware of, there might be other ones, but CryptoPunks was built on kind of like took what the Pepe guys had done and like took it a step further on Ethereum. So they issued these 10,000 limited edition punks that had different properties. So it was like a generative art project. They generated all these guys and they each had different properties. Like one would have a cigarette and a mohawk, and one would have like sunglasses and be bald or something.
So it had its own unique feature.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was on Ethereum. They actually gave them away and kind of like nobody really cared for the first couple of days. And then Mashable I think they did a feature on the project or something, and like a bunch of people claimed them. And this is in 2017. And even now, CryptoPunks are like one of the highest trade volumes for NFTs.
Wow.
So I think kind of a testament to the fact that, even though it's kind of like an ephemeral sort of abstract concept, there's definitely something exciting about owning, art that lives in the metaverse. So yeah, I had kind of been following along, was pretty excited, and just personally was, interested in art, was also interested in building, fun user experiences around crypto. And so I guess seeing, the CryptoKitties teams kind of pioneered the 721 standard in 2017. And so when I saw that had launched, I got really excited. I was like, okay, I think this is going to be a foundational component for lots of new experience, like a lot of fun things to do. Like, I think this is going to be a big part of, if crypto is going to hit kind of consumer mainstream, I think this is going to be a foundational component. So started prototyping just different things, and that ultimately kind of led into SuperRare.
And so, and we'll touch on some of those too. Like, we just touched on a little bit of gaming, kind of the history, right, of kind of where we're at now. There's some standards set, which we'll touch on as well. But can you touch on some other examples, right? There's people talking like we just touched on gaming, and that kind of makes sense. But and maybe you see this on the SuperRare platform or the marketplace. What other like examples can you share? Since we're talking about this could potentially be like the mainstream consumer, use case and some adoption. What other examples have you seen or in the market right now, such as maybe music? Again, we just touched on gaming. You can touch on digital art as well, but like, there's other NFTs like music and other tokenized kind of assets that you're seeing on SuperRare.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think music is a big one. This is one, and especially this year with shows are basically all essentially canceled. It's been challenging for musicians to have income, and I think they're using NFTs as like a sort of like a new media type almost. And so I think we're seeing a lot of experimentation with music. You have people issuing sort of like collectible versions of songs. But it's sort of like wide open. People are using NFTs for ticketing. They're like, really it's this sort of low level component, and you could build a lot of different things on top. So like people are trying ticketing. So like exclusive access to content. So creators are issuing NFTs to fans, and it's like, you need to have the NFT if you want to access the newsletter, or you get like first access. So it's like you first have to have the NFT before you can listen to the song or something like that. And then even within gaming, I think what's been pretty interesting too is like using the NFT as ownership over like land and some of these virtual worlds that are popping up. And so, I mean, that's really been interesting because you get a lot of these secondary market mechanics almost for free by tokenizing the game assets. And you kind of see that merging with some of the other art and culture stuff that's happening around NFTs. So people are building like venues in crypto voxels where they're showing off their digital art, but then also having like a DJ come in and actually like play a set in VR.
Whoa.
And yeah, so it's
No, that's pretty interesting stuff. Like, and where we at like in terms of the market? So there's other marketplaces. There's NFTs popping up. As you mentioned, maybe this pandemic kind of accelerated, certain things. Are we still super early in the NFT game?
Yeah, I think absolutely. It's still, if you look at just other types of markets and things, or like, even like video gaming, like, gaming is hundreds of billion-dollar industry, right? It's a massive industry. And I think we're still in like, tens of millions, maybe like 100 million NFTs, I think, sold in 2019. So it's still super early. And I think people are still experimenting with the use cases. Like for us, we were all really passionate about digital art and thought that it was going to be, the NFTs were kind of a critical component. But I think there's just so many other things we can do and experiences that we can build on top. So yeah, it's super early.
And what about this digital art? So like, what's the process like? If someone wants to, design, create something, and then create an NFT, what's kind of like the normal flow?
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty open. Like some people are tokenizing work that they had made previously, so kind of like historical work. But basically, with digital art, what you're storing in the NFT is a metadata file and like a link to an artwork file. So you have this, and like the cool thing is you just have this permanent record. So like that's a big part of art that's challenging, is knowing whether or not something you have is authentic and original. Because you can make really great knockoffs for a lot of famous art, and there's no way to know, especially if the artist, died 200 years ago, how do you even know? You're like, nobody even knows who had this before. And so this concept of like tokenizing the provenance record is super powerful, because that's one of the biggest components of the art market. You kind of get that for free with NFTs.
And we didn't, and there wasn't this option, right? Like to, like you said, not tokenize it, but the provenance factor of it, because anything online, you can copy it, you can copy paste, you can replicate it. So kind of like, for those tuning in, like that's kind of a critical component of why, and people are probably thinking like, why do you need blockchain? Like, well, why do you need a token? Why do what does that have to do with crypto? What do you have to do with crypto? But the point is that it's documented, right? It's immutable, it's a record, it's on the ledger. And that states the fact that you couldn't do that before, to say this is, one out of one. As you mentioned, things online, it's so easy to copy. And then in person or in the physical world, like you don't really know, like you said, it could be a knockoff. They look really good. But what the blockchain provides in this kind of scenario is an immutable record of the location, and kind of, you can't like, what the words I'm looking for, like you can't refuse that it's the one out of one.
Yeah, and I think like what's super powerful is like we have tools like the Wayback Machine that are kind of like archiving websites and things, but you don't have a good historical record. And so like I think by having this simple standard, it makes it super easy to say, hey, I'm Adam, I drew this picture. For whatever reason, I want to issue this token that asserts that like I created it at this, here's the tokenized metadata, here's what the file is. And people in the future can do with it what they want. But I think what we're seeing now, like even with projects like CryptoPunks and some of the older art on SuperRare, it's really fun to be able to go dig through the history and see like, wow, this token was created 200,000 blocks ago, right? It's like you can go look and you have all this proof that this thing happened at a certain time. And I think just the fact that you can do that is, it's game changing, especially for creative industries where, it is kind of a big deal if like somebody, borrows your work and doesn't like appropriately attribute you. Like you have this really strong record kind of backing you up now.
And coming from the physical world, like if you tokenize some kind of physical asset. It gets tokenized. Individual keeps that token, in their own wallet, private keys, and all that, and then they just send them the physical item.
So yeah, I think people do it a couple of different ways. So on SuperRare, it's exclusively digital art, but like for people who are doing this, yeah, there's a couple ways you can do it, right? You can like have people hand over the key before you transfer the physical good. But again, I think just like, I like to think about NFTs in the context of art is just, it's a certificate of authenticity, and it's super secure, right? It's like, you can at least, you may not trust the issuer, but the issuer issued it at a specific time on a specific day. And so even for art, that's like so much better than the existing systems where it's a lot of like in the art world, there'll be like stickers on the back of a painting that says like which gallery it came from. You're like, that's the best system we have is stickers on the back of the art. Like,
yeah,
come on, guys.
Yeah, that's not going to flow. And I think that's where kind of blockchain comes into, prove its case out to have this public transparency, way to identify, like you said, proof of authentication is important. And what kind of standards are you seeing? Like, so there's the and you mentioned the ERC 721s and a couple others. How has that helped kind of the NFT world?
Yeah, I think, it's just like, it's great for the consumer of the goods, right? It's going to work with any wallet that supports the standard. It's like the benefit there is just, you can have, some people like using the Coinbase wallet, or like some people like using Trust Wallet. Just like having all those options builds such a stronger foundation to like build something like this on top of, and it's like, you can see what sort of like web standards did for the internet. It's like, standards aren't super sexy, but they enable us to build sexy things like Snapchat, or what you can like build all these standard or like these experiences on top of the standards. And so for myself and my co-founders at SuperRare, that was kind of what we thought was going to happen with like, the 721 and 1155, these standards around unique virtual goods. That's sort of the first piece of infrastructure you need to start building new, UX on top of it.
And I think that goes, and the reason why I asked that is because, we're having all these conversations across different blockchains right now, and tooling and resources, and we're in this bubble. So it's important to kind of understand how is the adoption going to take place? Where does the value lie? Like, how do we get from point A to point B and make this valuable, like this NFT market? And standards is one way to make sure that it's an even playing field, like you said, to spur innovation, kind of build some shit, experiment, and allows everybody to kind of, even playing field to kind of launch some products that, that obviously adoption mainstream can kind of consume.
Yeah. And with art too, I think like there's, we talked about provenance, but like a big part of the art market is like art data. Like, it's not public information. You can't Google how many, you can Google the stock price of Amazon, but like, if you want to Google how many Picassos were sold last year, this isn't something you can figure out. And what's happening with NFTs is we're actually generating an awesome open source data set that anyone can go look at, consume the data, and use for whatever they want. So this, like, in addition to the physical item themselves, by having a standard, we're generating better, cleaner data sets around specific asset types. And that's like, again, it's kind of like a boring thing to think about, but it's a super powerful concept, because it's like, it's infinitely better than what we have right now, which is like proprietary data sets about art.
Yeah, and it kind of leads me, somewhat into my next question, which is like you said, the increase, the amount of total value has been increasing in the NFT market. What is that kind of? How do you interpret like some of the data? And you might have other data points to kind of prove the NFT market, gaining some traction, some momentum. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing is like people starting to understand why, like NFTs in themselves are not interesting. It's this standard. It's just this, like, it's this technical concept But when you apply it to certain industries, and you can kind of, you can start to see why it's so much better. Like, for example, in art, there's only a market for like the very top end of the market, where it's like, stuff sells for like hundreds of millions of dollars. But if you want to go, down to the street to a coffee shop, spend, $300 on a piece of art from somebody, like, good luck ever reselling that. If you wanted to, like, no one's gonna buy that from you, because there's no record. They don't know how much you paid for it. Like, who are you? Unless they like it because they think it's pretty and they want to put it on the wall. But that's not the only reason that people collect. Like, people collect for like patronage. They collect because they like a specific artist, or like, there's all these components of the story that are you can't really have for like the rest of a market. And so, like, by issuing this NFT, it's like adding to this story about this artist or this collector. You kind of get the story is growing the more people interact with that specific object, and that's something that's just impossible with the physical art market. And so, like, I think people are starting to understand, like, oh wow, this is cool. Like, by owning it, you become part of the history of that object. And it's like, I think that's like really what people are starting to figure out, is that it's like, oh, it's not just like you're buying a GIF on the internet. You're like participating in this like evolving culture.
Yeah, and I think to your point of, there's these super rare art paintings and stuff like that, and hundreds of millions of dollars, and then you can kind of, the local artist doesn't get exposure. So the NFT actually provides accessibility and global exposure, so that anybody can come across. And not only that, they can go to SuperRare and on this marketplace and kind of start trading, or being, giving access to some of the rare digital arts out there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I mean, it's a phrase that like gets overplayed, but people love to say, like, talk about democratizing the art market, but like, it is absolutely kind of leveling the playing field. But because before, it was just a few people who like, this is art history. This is important art, and this art is not important. And so the fact that anyone can issue an NFT, like, you can just go do it. You can create art anywhere, and you have a permanent record of it. You don't need to trust anybody else to store the record for you. And like, so it really does kind of open it up to new people who really haven't had access to the market before.
Yeah, and which kind of also leads to another question that I have, is like collectibles versus like trading, or like speculative art, or not speculative art, but the action of trading it. How do you see, I guess, NFTs affecting it one way or another? I'm sure, I think me personally, I think it benefits both ends, right? Like, you have access to art, and if you hold it, you hold it. If that's not your mindset of holding on to pieces, and you kind of want to, you like the fact of trading with one another, like cards, back in the day, or even now. What are your thoughts on, like, collecting versus like trading, and how NFTs, I guess, affect one or the other, impacts one or the other?
Yeah, so I think, in my references, mostly in art, but it's like, it's really frowned upon to, like, if you're seen as like a trader, it's like a taboo that, it's like, people won't sell you art anymore. And I think what's interesting with the NFTs, like, especially on Super, is like, or, just like with Solidity and smart contracts in general, is you can program in royalty payments for the artist. And so they have recurring income. They're able to pay their rent, and like, these are things that like everybody wants to be able to do. But with sort of like the existing contemporary art market, like, there are none of these royalties. And so, like, I think, having more participants in a market, makes it better. And so, like, it's going to give, having people buy and sell the art helps artists earn a living. And so I think that's great. Like, ultimately, and like, I'm sure
it depends on how you look at it, or like who you're talking to. Like, if you're looking at the artist, I could see it going both ways. Like, I could see someone, you just bought my art and then you sold it. Like, you didn't like, you didn't like it that much. You didn't hold on to it. At the same time, I I guess maybe it is a business model like paradigm shift to think how NFTs can affect like the creator of stuff, as you mentioned, passive income, royalties that, hey, at least I have some skin in the game. If they were to sell it, and if it continues selling and increases in value, I continue making money, and maybe
And
that's
more art. You get to make more art, right? You're not going to have to go have another second job or something. Like
exactly.
It's like thinking about how can we have recurring income for artists, and like what kind of new business models can we build now that we have like these smart contracts that we didn't have before. And so that's kind of how we think about it, is like, what are the, I think we're just scratching the surface of new business models to support creatives.
And where's the demand coming from? So one thing, I've had many of these discussions on cryptocurrencies and like blockchain, and this goes across the whole spectrum of even enterprise and the startup world. It's like, from your perspective, and I'm sure you've had like tons of discussions with a lot of creative artists and people in the space, in the creative space. Where's the demand coming from? Is the demand coming from like the consumer wanting an NFT, or is it demand internal where artists are wanting NFTs, or maybe there's some hybrid? But I'm always curious, right? Because that affects adoption. Like, I could have the best tech, but if it doesn't, if nobody wants it, if it doesn't solve problems, like there's gonna be no demand for it. Bunch of supply, but no demand. So what are you seeing, I guess, in the last few years and last few months? I'm not sure, but where do you see the demand coming from? The artist side, the consumer side? Is it just kind of everybody's trying to figure it out still?
Yeah, I think the artists were earlier to the game. Like they, more experimental, kind of like trying out new things, and saw this as an opportunity to, then like with digital art, it's harder to sell, right? Digital art's kind of like a small subset of the contemporary art market, even though it's the fastest growing as far as like people experimenting with new types of media, new types of art. So there was this kind of like, it was at odds, where it's like, if you go to Art Basel or something, people are still mostly buying like things printed on a canvas, or like oil paintings on canvas. And so
have you seen Banksy?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, where he designed, or the person designed that one, and it's shredded.
The self-destructing artwork, yeah, amazing.
Can you tokenize that, or what? Maybe tokenize each strip.
He should, yeah. Banksy, if you're watching, you should talk to me.
You should have done that. Huh?
Yeah, but I think it kind of probably started on the artist side, but then it's also hugely beneficial for the collector side. Like they. And I think another thing, like we were talking about access, like greater access for up and coming artists, it's the same for collectors. Where like the existing structure of the contemporary art market is not super friendly and welcoming for outsiders. Like it's hard to get into. It's kind of hard to learn how, the social norms, and like, oh, you didn't study art history, you sound like an idiot. And that's a theme that we've seen with a lot of art collectors, is like, it's really fun to collect art. It's like fun to hang out with artists. It's really fun to participate in an auction. And that's all part of the contemporary art market. It's a bunch of things, in my opinion, are inherently very fun, very positive. But it's, most people don't have access to it. And so I think what we're seeing here is a lot of people kind of discovering a passion for collecting art, who previously it seemed like this thing that was kind of unattainable. And so this is like an easy way, and it's, the whole thing is structured differently than the existing contemporary art market, right? Like with, NFTs and digital art, everyone hangs out in Discord and they're chatting all the time. And, it's like completely different than like, oh, which art school did you go to and which gallery are you working with? It's happening in real time. And so I think, anyway, yeah, so it's good for both sides. And so I think that's why we're seeing such adoption so quickly.
And kind of, I would say on the consumer side of these, of digital art and NFTs, like, is there a demographic? I mean, I you would assume younger, but you might have a different perspective of like who these collectors are. Do you see, demographics of 18 to 30, 30 to whatever, 45? Is it a wide spectrum? Or because the point being is like, is this going to be generational, right? Like as kids now, right, are barely, they have their phones now. They don't have a driver's license anymore, but they're gonna have their Bitcoin wallet. They're getting
Yeah,
used. My daughter's 5, right, and she knows about Bitcoin and blockchain because of my phone calls. So like, I'm giving Bitcoin. I just got my dad set up with a Bitcoin wallet.
sure.
Sent him some BTC, and like, I don't know, is it generational? What are you kind of seeing out there, even on the artist side too? Like, are there older artists kind of like, all right, like this is cool, like I can mess with this, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely, kind of like the younger generation understands it really quickly. That they get it, right? They're, buying, Fortnite dance moves and stuff like that. So it's like you kind of understand the value prop of the digital good a little bit easier. But at the same time, it is quite a wide demographic. Uh, there's this one of my favorite artists on SuperRare, this guy Lawrence Lee. I think he's 73 now. I mean,
Oh wow.
Lawrence, if I got your age wrong, don't be too mad. But he was like a pioneering digital artist. He was credited with creating the first illustrated children's book with digital art, and they didn't even know how to print it. Like he did all the graphics on the computer, and then they were like, how do we get the art out of the computer? Like it was, and so he was super early, and he's been working with us. He was, really early, probably like one of the first, I don't know, maybe 30 artists that we had, we're lucky to work with. And so it really is a quite wide spectrum, but definitely, people who are already spending a lot of time, on the internet and in apps and things probably pick it up a little quicker. But
Yeah. And I think there's a psychology aspect of it too, of like going back to like my thoughts on adoption and people like buying and selling. um it's just different in the sense that, like, do you really own it? Can you touch it, feel it? What do you say to kind of those critics? Same thing with critics on the Bitcoin side too. Like, it's a great use case. And we just talked
yeah,
about it. We just talked about UNSF and like the market like collapsing, right? And Bitcoin taking off, and it has its critics, and obviously, a few of these major players that we've heard on the news recently, like, putting their reserves in BTC. What's your take on kind of that mental mindset of getting over the hurdle of like, physical and digital kind of ownership?
yeah, I think a lot of people have not, they kind of assume, or like the biggest critics for us anyway are like, well, why would I buy that? It's worthless. I could just take a screenshot and then I own the art, which is an absurd thing to say. It's like I had a replica made of the Mona Lisa. Now
Yeah.
I have it too. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you have a Mona Lisa, but nobody comes from around the world to visit it or look at it. So it's not the same. And so I think what's interesting is like looking at like, what are people buying when they buy collectibles, physical or digital? Because it's not just the object itself, right? Like you don't spend $100 million on an Andy Warhol because you want to look at the Andy Warhol, right? This is like, I think people have never really thought about collector psychology very much. And so once you start, digging in, it's like actually really complex, right? There's like the patronage aspect, there's like a social signaling aspect. And so I think it's like sort of like don't knock it before you try it sort of thing, because it's easy to criticize, but at the same time, they don't really know what they're talking about.
No, yeah, I think, like you said, there's so many aspects. Yeah, the art. I mean, I'm not familiar with the art world, but I know some people that are collectors, and I used to work. I was in banking, and so I know people, yeah, that would go to Art Basel or Basel, in various parts of the world, and especially here in Miami. But I think that's going to be another kind of generational thing too. And I think, it's happening now. As you mentioned, it kind of democratizes, the art world, and allowing people to come and go. And then the cool thing is you have here, SuperRare, right? Like a marketplace to engage liquidity, being able to see what's out there and stuff like that. Because if it wasn't for, marketplaces and platforms like yours, like you wouldn't be able to find these things, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's a new market, and we're just kind of trying to raise awareness and make it easier to access. So,
do you think there's going to be art galleries with like some of these pieces on the wall, instead of it being an art on canvas, it's going to be like embedded in the screen?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there are digital art galleries that focus exclusively on digital. And like I think the NFT component's just like a facilitator. Like it's facilitating commerce because you now have this super secure certificate of authenticity, or however you want to think about it. And yeah, there's absolutely going to just be, I think like prior to crypto, like being interested in just, art generally, it was like, well, VR is getting better, displays are getting better and cheaper, and projectors are getting better and cheaper. And so like reimagining, like, again, like, I love looking at oil paint on canvases, but at the same time, it's pretty cool to have, to see like a VJ set and like thinking about experiential art and like how is art going to change. I think it's still super like it's continuing to evolve. And so I think, yeah.
Especially since we're stuck at home too.
Yeah, exactly. So,
but and it's interesting because blockchain is not I mean, blockchain's a buzzword, but like distributed systems, cryptography, right? Networks, like that's been around for years. And it's, I think from the discussions that we've had from these conferences and just being in the space, it's like just the technology overall is now allowing, it's snowballing, right? This is part of the stack, as you mentioned earlier. The blockchain is part of the stack, and now everything else is coming around too. Like you said, AR, VR. I mean, that's been around, I think, probably like early 90s, maybe even the government's probably before. But, it's been around quite a long time, and that was the next big thing. But I think it was just ahead of its time. And now blockchain is now facilitator of value, data, encryption, right? Over the internet, right? You and I can text, I can Venmo you money, but that's locally in dollar. Like what blockchain opens up is the value through online. I should be able to transfer you something pretty quick, or Bitcoin, dollar, whatever. But now the NFT is another use case, and coming out with how it can be used, and like you said, this is going to just go into different kind of experiences overall.
Yeah, it's it's exciting, right? We got digital, so like digitally native money. Now we're getting digitally native art. That's how I think about it.
And I think to even tie this into what you said of going to the local artists down below, I think NFTs also help influencers, right? Like YouTubers, these various like online celebrities that pop up. I think this is like another avenue of income and another avenue of business.
Yep. Yeah. 100%.
And so I think we got like a couple more minutes here. Anything else you want to share about SuperRare in the sense of what differentiates you guys from some of the other marketplaces?
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I think our main, like I said, I don't think about us like an NFT marketplace. Like really, we're trying to build a platform for digital art, and it's like NFTs are a component of that, but ultimately, I think there's a huge opportunity to get more people around the globe involved in the arts and excited about art. And I think this is kind of one way forward. It's like, it starts by opening up the market, and then there's more money available for like artist residencies, and like just the more people who are interested in art, the more opportunity there is for creatives, and then also for people to be, be a patron, like take time out of your day to look at a piece of art that's special to you, right? There's like, I think it's great for both sides of the market. And yeah, for anybody who's listening, not if you don't think about yourself as an artist or an art collector, maybe you should re-examine that assumption because
I think it's a great way in. It's a great way in. Like you said, I do see these art galleries and like I try to go into them honestly, but I don't go into all of them. Like I don't know who, I don't know much about the artist, but definitely try to like um, learn about it and educate myself. But I think like the platform that you're providing allows, like you said, everybody from all over the world can log on and like get on the internet and like check some of this stuff out and then more exposure for the creative side. I know you mentioned you had like one of your favorite artists or whatever. Are there any interesting artists on your platform that no names, but just kind of like cool examples or I don't know what kind of data you have on them, like where they're at in parts of the world or what they're selling or their
yeah.
journeys.
So yeah, it's artists all over the world doing, and it's totally different styles. Like it's a complete spectrum of people who are doing mixed media, where a lot of it is like physically created, and then they're importing it and kind of like altering what they created physically. And then you have at the other end of the spectrum people who are like inside of VR using tilt brush to create extremely elaborate sculptures.
Wow.
And I think that's it's really exciting to dive into, like put on a Quest or one of these headsets and like kind of explore something that can be huge, right? You can have a sculpture that's like 20 feet tall in VR. And I think just try to like get out of the mindset of like, oh, art's just this thing on a canvas that's on the wall, to like what is like experiential art's really interesting. Like we've done a couple of like VR exhibitions, and the exhibitions are actually these enormous sculptures that are inside of this virtually created world. And it's super fun to go walk around. And like in New York, they have some of these places like Storm King where you can walk around and see all these sculptures. But the cool thing here is you can do it with anyone in the world and walk around it at the same time. So I think that's like, art's often best when it's a shared experience. And so I think like this really facilitates that and makes it easy for people to get together and appreciate.
Yeah, and I think art has no boundaries, right? No limits. And this is the new wave of another aspect of art, right? There's still going to be the old school, like you're still going to have your art piece collectors and traditional art collectibles. But as we move forward, it's just another evolution of art and another experience. And I think it's interesting. And as we can tell, just from kind of the market values increasing and kind of the more NFTs, you support you're an Ethereum based project or ERC 720s. Do you see like yourself supporting other being interoperable with other kind of NFTs like from other chains?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's just Ethereum right now is the easiest place to build. It's got the most developer support, but at the same time people love to experiment and try different platforms. And so I think what's really important is kind of like knowing who the artist is, and like if they have things that are on Ethereum or maybe they're on Counterparty, maybe a certain type of collector is going to really care about that. But ultimately, it's this certificate of authenticity. And so as long as that's pretty trustworthy, I could see, that these NFTs being interoperable across chain or,
for sure,
people minting on different platforms. Yep.
Yeah. No, that's cool, man. And so we're going to kind of wrap this thing up here. Where can people find you? Where can they go check out the digital art? If you want to make some plugs into the audience here.
Yeah, sure. If you want to get in touch with me, probably easiest on Twitter. So SuperRare John on Twitter. DMs are open, guys. So say hi. And yeah, go check out SuperRare, superrare.co. Enter the world of digital art.
Awesome. Well, yeah, man, this was a pleasure talking to you. You haven't been on the conference in the Reimagine conference, right? It's the first time.
Yeah, it's the first time.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for joining, man. We have a lot of university partners and students, organizations that we work with, thousands of students and over 80 plus universities that we're targeting to. We'll have students on panels and like other interviews as well to get their perspective and insight. So we just appreciate kind of your support joining us here and participating and like taking time out of your day to kind of share the NFT world that is blossoming. And I was just talking to who was I talking to right now? On the Polkadot side, right? And
Yeah.
Kusama, like I was just talking to Bruno, and like he just launched an NFT kind of project on Kusama, and like launching that, and that's kind of been really successful. So it just kind of tied into this conversation, which is great. But
Yeah.
so
Awesome.
yeah, man, I appreciate you joining. You know, we'll follow up. We'll follow up again, and hope to have you back.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much, Adam. It was a pleasure.
All right, for all of you tuning in to Reimagine 2020, thank you for watching this discussion. You can watch us on the Reimagine 2020 YouTube channel. Go visit SuperRare as well. Check out the digital art, and let's get your insights too as this new wave of technology takes over the world. So thanks for tuning in. All right, John, have a good one.
Yeah, you too, Adam. Take care.